Imagine a time when weapons could burn on water and airships floated like luxury hotels in the sky. Some of the most groundbreaking inventions in history weren't always welcomed with open arms. These are the strangest historical inventions that were banned for being too advanced. In the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire created something that might as well have been magic, known as Greek fire. It was a weapon that could burn on water, stick to anything it touched, and continue to burn even after being doused in water. It was very ahead of its time. As you can imagine, this was mostly used in naval warfare, and it was so devastating that it helped keep the Byzantines in control of their empire for centuries. The exact formula for Greek fire was kept a closely guarded secret. A lot of historians believe that it involved a mixture of ingredients like sulfur, naphtha, a flammable liquid hydrocarbon mixture, and a chemical compound called quicklime, but no one really knows for sure. The Byzantine Navy would deploy it using special siphons mounted on ships, spraying the burning liquid onto enemy vessels. The fear surrounding Greek fire was so intense that some believed it had mystical powers, and everyone was desperate to figure out how to replicate it. But the secret was lost over time, and by the end of the empire, the knowledge of Greek fire disappeared with it. So, not necessarily banned, but no longer a thing, thankfully. The invention of the mechanical clock in the 13th century was pretty huge, to say the least. Before this, people relied on sundials, water clocks, or church bells to track time, but when mechanical clocks came onto the scene, they completely transformed things. Being able to measure time accurately meant people could schedule work more precisely, leading to a much more efficient and productive day-to-day existence. And I know what you're thinking, why is the mechanical clock on the list? It never went away. Well, that almost wasn't the case. See, this new technology wasn't universally welcomed. Some were scared that precise timekeeping would disrupt the traditional rhythm of life. Work hours became regulated, and people's lives were governed by the clock rather than the sun. Some places banned the widespread use of mechanical clocks at first because of this massive shift, and some even feared the influence it could have on religion, as the bell ringing of church clocks wouldn't be the main way to track time for daily activities and prayers anymore. The introduction of the mechanical clock signaled the start of industrialization, and with that came new social challenges. As the technology became more widespread, there was a major shift from a society that lived in harmony with natural cycles to one that was now governed by this constant ticking machine. In a lot of ways, the clock became a symbol of progress and a tool for control. It was the dawn of a new age, but also a sign that technology would soon have a much deeper impact on how people live their lives. You know, not to be overly dramatic or anything like that. In the early 1900s, the Zeppelin revolutionized air travel. Unlike airplanes, this massive airship could carry passengers across countries with far more comfort. It's not often that you see images of what the insides of these things looked like for passenger travel, but oh boy, were they lavish. Invented by Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, they were considered marvels of engineering. But as useful as they were also dangerously vulnerable, especially during wartime. In fact, Zeppelins were used extensively by Germany during World War I for bombing raids over Britain, but with the development of faster, more agile aircraft, they became obsolete. But then there was the infamous Hindenburg disaster in 1937 when the Zeppelin LZ-129, one of the largest airships ever built, caught fire during a landing in New Jersey. It crashed, killing 36 people, and at that point people just weren't really that enthused about riding in Zeppelins anymore. Zeppelins are still used for advertising today, but the crash led to the banning of commercial travel. Vikings were expert navigators who traveled vast distances across the seas, often in pretty crappy weather, and one of the tools they would have used to navigate was a mysterious crystal known as the sunstone, thought to be a form of Iceland spar, a form of calcite that has the ability to polarize light. This helped them determine the position of the sun even when the sky was overcast or when they were navigating in the long Arctic nights. This could have allowed the Viking explorers to confidently chart their course, but the Vikings never left any detailed records of their navigation methods, and the sunstone's use wasn't fully understood until centuries later. By the time we caught wind of it, its use had faded into myth, and the technology was mostly forgotten. If the Vikings had fully utilized the sunstone and passed down their knowledge, who knows how much further they could have gone. Leonardo da Vinci was hundreds of years ahead of his time. In the late 15th century, he sketched plans for what he called an aerial screw, a device that looks very similar to a helicopter. His design had a large screw-like spiral that would theoretically lift a machine off the ground. While it was never built and probably wouldn't have worked with the technology of the time, he still envisioned the mechanics of flight long before powered aircraft became a thing. The problem with his helicopter was that it relied on the human body's power to turn the screws. You'd have to manually crank it, which, as you might guess, wouldn't have spun nearly fast enough to get the thing off the ground, let alone have it stay there. While it wasn't banned per se, it was practically ignored for centuries as something too outlandish for its time. But the really cool thing is that today we do have machines based on this exact concept. Of course, powered by far more reliable energy sources than human muscle. Imagine having to manually move a helicopter like a paddle boat. That's silly. I kind of like that idea. Nikola Tesla, known for his genius in electrical engineering, invented the Tesla coil in 1891 as a way to demonstrate wireless energy transmission. The coil could produce high voltage electricity, and with it, Tesla dreamed of sending power without wires to anywhere in the world. At the time, this idea was revolutionary, but also incredibly dangerous. Tesla demonstrated his invention by making the air crackle with lightning bolts, showing that electricity could jump large distances. This, of course, was terrifying to some folks. It opened the door to far too many possibilities, from weaponized energy to unregulated power grids. Some say that certain powerful people were actually afraid of Tesla's ideas, and that's why his coil was banned in certain places. While wireless transmission didn't really take off during his time, Tesla's coil did lay the groundwork for future breakthroughs. It ended up becoming a symbol of what could have been if the world had been ready to embrace it. Well, today, the Tesla coil is still a crowd favorite at science museums at least, but it does make you wonder, what could our world look like now if wireless energy had been fully developed back then? The concept of automata, self-operating machines, sounds like a pretty modern idea, but it actually dates back centuries. The 18th century is when things really started to get interesting. Craftsmen like Jacques de Vaucanson made complex mechanical figures that could do some pretty amazing things for their day, like a life-size figure that would play 12 different melodies on a flute. He built that in 1735. Devices like these were more than just toys. They were early versions of robots, way ahead of their time. But they were very complex and costly, so only a few were ever built. As these automatons became more popular, some started to worry about what they represented. Some were scared that they were a sign that humanity was being replaced by machines. Well, that sounds very similar to the types of fears people are having today. There were also rumors at the time that these creations had occult or supernatural powers. That's more fittingly old-timey. But because of these fears, though, devices like this were sometimes banned, especially in certain parts of Europe where the clergy and rulers worried about the implications of machines that could mimic human behavior. Automata weren't just inventions of the Renaissance, though. They actually had their roots in ancient Greece. Greek engineers like Hero of Alexandria built early steam-powered machines that could open doors or even serve drinks. He created an ancient version of a vending machine. You'd insert a coin and this machine would pour a drink for you. Just nuts. These things were clearly groundbreaking. Some think that Hero's automated systems might have been used in temples too, powered by steam to create these awe-inspiring spectacles. But a lot of the knowledge about these machines was lost for centuries, and some people think it might have been purposely hidden, maybe to avoid shaking up the social order or threatening traditional jobs. Imagine if the Greeks had really gone all in on this stuff, though. They could have ended up with a way more advanced society. Who knows how different things might have looked if those creations hadn't been forgotten over time. Charles Babbage's difference engine, developed in the 1830s, is often hailed as the first mechanical computer. His design could perform very complex calculations, a task that would have been an incredible time saver for mathematicians at the time. The invention was a huge leap forward, but it came with a hefty price tag and the suspicion of a government that wasn't entirely convinced that it was necessary. After Babbage's funding was pulled, he couldn't finish the project, and the difference engine was left as nothing more than a fascinating concept. It wasn't until the late 20th century that engineers successfully built a working version of his design, proving that his ideas were way ahead of their time. Some say the British government might have banned the project out of sheer lack of understanding or fear of how this technology could impact workers, industries, and jobs. But whatever the reason, Babbage's dream to create an automated machine for calculations didn't come to be in his lifetime, and computing didn't make the leap forward until much later. In the mid-1800s, the first ironclad warships were introduced, revolutionizing naval warfare. These ships, which had iron armor plating instead of traditional wooden hulls, made wooden ships pretty much obsolete. The most famous ironclads were the USS Monitor and the CSS Virginia, which famously faced off during the American Civil War. These ships changed naval battles forever, and because ironclads were so effective, wooden ships were just phased out, and the technology was quickly adopted by countries around the world. The idea of an impenetrable ship made with advanced materials like iron created a new arms race in naval technology. Ironclads may have been banned or scrapped in some countries, but they certainly paved the way for modern naval warfare. Nikola Tesla is one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. In fact, he helped shape much of the tech we use to this day.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, many of his inventions have been lost to history.
Remote control navies, cameras that could photograph a person's imagination.
And of course, the death ray.
Nikola Tesla is famous for his work with electricity, but he also worked on military technology. Like Alfred Nobel, he thought the best way to stop wars was to make them so terrible that no one would want to fight. Tesla invented a small boat that could be controlled with radio signals. He could start it, stop it, steer it without anyone actually being on board. His idea was that if you could take humans out of the fight, battleships would stop being built, and that, quote, the most tremendous artillery afloat will be of no more use than so much scrap iron. Back in 1898, at Madison Square Garden, Tesla showed off this boat to the public. The boat was a small unmanned vessel that Tesla controlled with a radio transmitter. This was way ahead of its time. Remote control technology was just unheard of back then. At the time, people were so baffled that some even thought he was using magic or mind control to steal the boat. So this invention did technically see the light of day, just not on the massive scale he was envisioning.
Call it a death ray, or as Tesla would, call it a peace ray. According to Tesla, prior to his death in 1943 and the Cold War in 1947, he had been working on a particle beam that could produce enough energy to destroy entire armies, no matter how far away they might be. I mean, there were limits. The beam wouldn't have been able to bend across the Earth to reach adversaries on the other side of the globe, but it did have pretty good range, and it was incredibly powerful. He pitched the idea to a number of governments, including the US government and the Soviet Union. Can you guess who took him up on his offer? The Soviets. Luckily, as far as we know, Tesla was never actually able to create the weapon, but just to be sure, after Tesla's passing, the US government went to the hotel where he had been staying and pretty much ransacked the place. To their relief, they found no proof that the weapon had ever made it past the conceptualization stage. Or so they say. For all we know, they've got it stored away somewhere in a secure military facility under lock and key, just waiting for the perfect moment to unleash all hell on some unlucky enemy. Only time will tell.
So Tesla had an interesting philosophy on how world peace would be achieved. Basically, create something so terrifyingly dangerous that no one would ever want to use it, thus scaring world leaders out of engaging in violent conflicts, kind of like the death ray. Another one of these scary ideas was the artificial tidal wave, a tidal wave that could be set off at will. The idea was that this massive wave could be used as a weapon in naval warfare to wipe out enemy ships. Tesla Tesla believed he could generate this tidal wave by using a series of synchronized explosions underwater. He thought up a machine that could trigger these explosions remotely, creating a wave so powerful it would crash down on enemy fleets, causing massive destruction. At the time, the papers wrote that this artificial tidal wave technology would render navies useless and bring humanity one step closer to world peace. But the invention never actually came to be, at least that we know of.
In 1901, Tesla began working on a groundbreaking invention that would change the way the world viewed electricity. A 185-foot tall, mushroom-shaped wireless energy tower that could transmit messages and images to ships at sea and across the Atlantic Ocean, and power the entirety of New York City by transmitting millions of volts of electricity through the air using only the Earth to conduct the signal. In order to do this, he secured a $150,000 grant from American financier and investment banker J.P. Morgan, who you might have heard of from our Titanic videos. For 5 years, Tesla worked tirelessly on his invention, but unfortunately, his vision never came to fruition because in 1906, Morgan cut his funding, likely due to the fact that if Tesla was successful in his endeavor, he would have greatly decreased or even eradicated the profits of Morgan's other energy sector holdings, which is too bad because I personally would really love it if I didn't have to pay an electric bill once a month, but c'est la vie, I suppose. Now, eradicating electric bills and improving Atlantic communications weren't the only things Tesla had hoped to use his wireless energy transmitter for. Oh no, in fact, the entire idea was actually sparked by Nikola Tesla's love of flight, and the tower was really just a prelude to what he had actually hoped to create: electric-powered supersonic airships. In 1919, Tesla told Reconstruction magazine that he had once planned on developing aircrafts that would hover 8 miles above Earth's surface and fly at speeds that would allow pilots to travel from New York City to London in just 3 hours. But of course, in order for this to work, he would have had to have been successful in creating his wireless transmitter, because the aircrafts he dreamed of did not carry fuel. Of course, this never went ahead because the transmitter was never completed, but think of how much different life would have been if it worked.
At the top, I discussed Nikola Tesla's idea about building a fleet of remote-controlled ships, but he didn't want to stop there. He imagined a world where almost every vehicle would be remote-operated, and not just vehicles, but just full-on robots, too. After he'd showed off his remote-controlled boat, a reporter suggested it could be used as a weapon, like a torpedo carrying dynamite. Tesla reportedly flipped out at this and quickly set the record straight. He told the reporter that what he was showing wasn't just a weapon, but the first of a new kind of machines, robots. He called them mechanical men, stating, quote, "You do not see there a wireless torpedo, you see there the first of a race of robots, mechanical men, which will do the laborious work of the human race." What he wanted was a future where robots would help people by taking over tough and dangerous tasks, making life easier and safer for everyone, at the same time allowing us to focus on more creative things that machines would never be able to do. Unfortunately, today, pretty much the exact opposite has happened thanks to AI, but that's a topic for another video. Tesla was always thinking about new ways to harness energy. One of his big ideas was the concept of solar and wind energy. Tesla believed that the sun and earth were huge, untapped sources of energy that could be used to power everything. He imagined creating devices that could capture sunlight and turn it into electricity. But Tesla didn't want to stop there. He also thought about ways to send this solar power wirelessly so people everywhere could use it without needing to be connected to power lines. Tesla's ideas about solar power were way ahead of his time. Today, we have solar panels and other technology to capture energy from the sun, but Tesla was dreaming about this over 100 years ago. He referred to solar and wind energy at the time as cosmic energy. Now, solar power has been used on a smaller scale for centuries, but it wouldn't be implemented in the types of ways we see it being used today until much later.
In the 1890s, Tesla created something pretty terrifying: an earthquake machine. by accident. You see, in 1893, Tesla patented a machine that generated electricity through steam-powered oscillation. The purpose of the machine was to vibrate fast enough to generate electricity, which it did, but then it also did something else. One day, while attempting to tune the machine to his house, things got a bit out of hand. The ground began to shake, but instead of turning the machine off, it's Tesla, he decided to turn it up, and that's when he heard a loud crack. All of a sudden, it was as though he had created a full-on earthquake in his house. Heavy machinery, notes, and books were falling over and flying off of tables and walls. Tesla's reaction? To take a hammer to the generator and destroy it before it destroyed him. If he hadn't, who knows what could have happened. Perhaps the small man-made earthquake would have created a chain reaction that ended in the whole world collapsing and many of us having never been born. What kind of world would that be? When the police arrived, he told his staff to stay quiet about the whole thing. So it wasn't until many years later when he told the story that this terrible invention was revealed. However, it did lead to generators, so good job, Tesla.
Tesla was even picturing weather control long before it was being whispered about on message boards on the internet over a century later. He believed that with the right technology, it might be possible to influence and change weather patterns. He thought he could use electricity to make it rain or prevent storms using powerful electrical machines to send energy into the atmosphere, which could then affect the weather. For example, if there was a drought, his theoretical machines could create rain to help crops grow, or if there was a dangerous storm, the machines could calm it down before it caused any serious damage. Tesla's weather control idea was based on his understanding of how energy and the atmosphere work together. Now, of course, he never built the machine that could actually control the weather, but as always, his ideas were ahead of his time. Nowadays, scientists are still exploring ways to influence the weather. Some say they've already succeeded.
Now here's a thought. Camera. In 1933, Nikola Tesla attempted to invent a thought camera. He said he was convinced that a definitive image formed in thought must, by reflex action, produce a corresponding image on the retina, which might be read by a suitable apparatus. In order to test this theory, Tesla conceptualized a plan, which consisted of reflecting an image on an artificial retina, taking a photograph, and projecting that image onto a screen. A process which he theorized would allow people's imagination and thoughts to be read as though they were an open book. Of course, this didn't work because that's not how eyeballs work, but it was certainly an interesting thought, one that we couldn't see on a screen. On the other hand, if it had worked, which it didn't, I mean, it never made it out of the conceptualization stage, it would have revolutionized lie detecting and interrogation methods. And then maybe MK Ultra would have never happened.
Thousands of inventions have been locked away by the US government under secrecy orders. In the 90s, GM rolled out a sleek electric car that customers loved, but then crushed every single one of them. And a water-powered car was either a scam or something so disruptive, the inventor didn't live to tell the full story. These are inventions that were suppressed because they worked too well. Here's something most people don't know. There are thousands of inventions we're not even allowed to know about. Since 1951, the US has had something called the Inventions Secrecy Act, which lets the government slap a secrecy order on any patent application if they think it could be a threat to national security. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a weapon, it just means it works a little too well. As of the most recent numbers, over 5,000 inventions are still under secrecy orders. Stuff like radar and stealth technology have been kept under wraps, but there's also more out there stuff, like people who claim they've invented machines that could make free energy or engines that could move spaceships without using fuel. Inventors like Robert Gould and James Constant both filed patents that were immediately locked down. They weren't allowed to talk about their inventions, publish papers, or commercialize them. In some cases, the orders last decades. The government can even renew them indefinitely. There's no way to know what's in those hidden patents unless the order gets lifted, and even then, they often show up heavily redacted. Back in the late 90s, General Motors put out an electric car called the EV1. It was sleek, fast, totally electric, and people who drove them absolutely loved them. Celebrities like Tom Hanks and Mel Gibson got in on it. And then GM pulled the plug. Not only did they stop making them, they recalled every single car and crushed them. Officially, GM claimed the cars weren't profitable and there wasn't enough demand, but the people who had them strongly disagreed. The EV1 worked. There were charging stations in California, the cars were reliable, and they didn't rely on gas, and that might have been the problem. There's a whole documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car that dives into this. It talks about how oil companies weren't too thrilled about a car that needed no oil changes, no gas, barely any maintenance. Some say the car died not because it failed, but because it worked a little too well. In the 90s, an inventor named Stanley Meyer claimed he created a car that could run on water. He made what he called a water fuel cell, which supposedly split water into hydrogen and oxygen efficiently enough to power a car. He even got a patent for the technology, and there are videos of him demonstrating a working dune buggy using only water as fuel. Of course, this was a huge deal. For real, oil wouldn't be nearly as important anymore. Meyer turned down million-dollar offers, and even the Pentagon reportedly showed interest, but then the story took a turn. Meyer was sued for fraud, and the court ruled that he misrepresented his invention. Some say he just didn't play by the rules big corporations wanted. And then in 1998, while having dinner at a restaurant in Ohio with two Belgian investors, Meyer suddenly ran outside clutching his throat and collapsed. His brother claimed that his last words were, "They poisoned me." The official cause of death was a brain aneurysm, but this obviously set off some conspiracy theories. To this day, no one successfully reproduced Meyer's water fuel cell. Was it a scam? Yeah, probably, but it's a pretty strange story all the same. Now, this one's wild, because it actually worked and even made it to the prototype stage. In 2007, Indian automaker Tata Motors signed a huge deal with French engineer Guy Negret and his company Motor Development International to produce a car powered entirely by compressed air. Negret had been working on air-powered prototypes since 1997, and by 2004, the first AirPod models were rolling. These tiny vehicles, nicknamed the AirPod, could reach around 43 to 60 miles per hour and run up to 135 miles on a full 175-liter tank, filled in just 90 seconds. There were plans for commercial rollout in India by 2010 to 2011, but by 2009, Tata admitted the technology still had problems. The AirPod could only drive about 80 to 130 miles before needing to refill the air tanks. That's not terrible, but for regular drivers, it's a lot less than what gas cars can do. Plus, refilling stations for compressed air weren't set up anywhere, so practical use was a headache. Guy passed away in June of 2016, and promises that AirPods would hit the market by 2020 never came to be. Back in the 1930s, a guy named Royal Raymond Rife claimed that he had built a machine that could kill cancer cells using electromagnetic frequencies, basically blasting tumors with specific radio waves without hurting the healthy cells. Rife actually demonstrated his machine to doctors and investors, and some early reports were promising, but then his lab was conveniently destroyed by a fire. One theory is that pharmaceutical companies felt threatened by his technology because it could have wiped out cancer without expensive treatments and surgery. The official story was that there wasn't enough proof, and the medical world dismissed Rife's work as quackery. After that, research on his device pretty much stopped. To this day, no solid clinical trials have backed the machine, but there are still people out there who swear by Rife machines for alternative cancer treatment. The idea of machines that give off more energy than they use, free energy, has been around for over a century. Nikola Tesla had this giant tower in New York called the Wardenclyffe that was supposed to beam wireless electricity across the world. Then you've got Townsend Brown, who claimed he figured out a way to reduce gravity using high voltage disks. And Henry Moray said he built a box that could pull electricity straight out of the environment. Even if one of these actually worked the way they claimed, it would have completely changed the world. But every time someone came up with one of these inventions, it either got shut down, buried, or was just laughed off as junk science. Tesla's tower was torn down, Brown's work never made it past the lab, Moray's device vanished after endless legal trouble. Now, was all this stuff just bogus? I mean, most likely, yeah, but is there a slim chance that the technology actually worked and got quietly buried by big energy companies? Hey, you never know. In the 1920s, a Canadian mechanic and inventor named Charles Pogue reportedly invented a carburetor that let cars get 200 miles per gallon. Then in the 70s and 80s, inventor Tom Ogle claimed he had a system that vaporized fuel so efficiently his car got about 100 miles per gallon. These were huge breakthroughs. Imagine slashing fuel costs and emissions overnight. But both men ran into problems. Ogle got offers from investors, but then things got weird. Ogle's system was never mass produced, produced. People around him said he was being pressured to sell or shut up. And then in 1981, at just 26 years old, Ogle died suddenly from what was ruled an overdose. But people close to him, they weren't buying that. And Pogue's original designs also kind of disappeared. Clearly these guys were onto something, so the way both stories just kind of stop out of nowhere definitely makes you wonder. Joshua Silver, a physicist from the UK, invented a really clever pair of glasses that let wearers adjust the focus themselves. No more expensive visits to the optometrist or needing multiple pairs for reading and distance. Just twist a dial and there you go, crystal clear vision for everyone. This could have been a game changer, especially in poorer parts of the world where there isn't much access to eye care. You'd think companies would be all over something like this, but no. The glasses were a hit in tests and charity programs, but they never really made it into stores. Why is that? Well, the story goes that big eyewear companies weren't into it. These glasses basically made them unnecessary. Again, no high-priced exams, no need for different lenses. Silver pushed for wider distribution, especially in developing countries, but that didn't really happen. Glasses are still out there in small programs and they actually work, but they never took off the way they should have. It's a super simple invention that could have helped millions of people see clearly and saved them hundreds of dollars, but instead it got quietly sidelined. In 1989, two chemists, Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons, claimed they'd pulled off cold fusion. Basically a way to create tons of clean energy at room temperature without needing a reactor or tons of fuel. If it was real, it could have changed the world. Cheap, endless power without pollution or radiation. But right after they announced it, things went south. Other labs tried to copy their experiment, and they couldn't get the same results. The scientific community turned on them. A lot of them called it junk science. The media also flipped, and soon cold fusion was being mocked everywhere. Their funding disappeared and Pons and Fleischmann kind of faded from the spotlight, but not everyone thinks it was just a bad experiment. Some believe the whole thing got buried on purpose. After all, if you've got a breakthrough that could wipe out the need for oil, coal, and nuclear power, it's not exactly going to make energy companies happy. Today, most people think the whole thing was a flop, but there's still a small group of scientists working on this, convinced that there's something there. A strange heat-resistant material created by a British hairdresser could survive blasts that would melt steel, but its formula vanished when he died. Ancient swords that could slice through metal like it was paper were made with a secret steel recipe lost to time and still impossible to perfectly copy. And a type of concrete built 2,000 years ago can actually repair its own cracks. These are lost inventions scientists today can't recreate. Starlight was this weird, almost unbelievable material created by a British hairdresser named Maurice Ward during the 70s and 80s. Somehow he'd come up with a substance that could supposedly handle insane amounts of heat. Heat that would melt metal, vaporize plastic, and kill you instantly. But this Starlight material would hold up against it. This clip here is from BBC's Tomorrow's World, which aired in 1990. Here they blowtorch an egg coated in the material, and when they crack it open, the egg inside is still raw. This segment introduced a lot of people to this new form of plastic, which could supposedly withstand nuclear-level heat and space re-entry temperatures. Obviously, NASA and Boeing were interested, even weapons labs wanted it. But Ward was paranoid about getting ripped off, so he never let anyone keep a sample. He let them test it, sure, but he kept the formula a secret. Supposedly, only a couple people in his family ever knew it. We still don't really know what it was made of. Oddly, one of his daughters claimed, though, that it was safe enough to eat and that they'd fed it to dogs and horses. I wonder how they found that out. Anyway, unfortunately, Maurice Ward died in 2011, so we may never know how this stuff was made. There was once a sword so sharp and strong it became legendary across the ancient world. They were called Damascus blades. These blades were incredible. They could slice through metal, and not only that, they were also gorgeous, with these swirling, water-like patterns in them. But by the 18th century, production just stopped. We have examples of these swords, but no one today can completely recreate the process. Blacksmiths and scientists have tried, and yeah, you can get close, but something's just missing. The steel actually came from India and Sri Lanka. where blacksmiths made something called Wootz steel. They melted iron in small sealed containers with special plant materials and let it cool super slowly. That slow cooling created tiny particles of carbon inside the metal. Some scientists think those particles formed little tube-like structures, basically carbon that organized itself in a way that made the steel way stronger than normal. The knowledge just kind of disappeared. Maybe the specific ore they used ran out, maybe the trade routes that delivered the right ingredients got cut off, but whatever happened, by the 1700s, it was gone. You can technically buy Damascus blades today, but they're not genuine Damascus steel. They just look really nice. And they probably cut pretty well. We all know the Pantheon and ancient Roman bridges have stood for over 2,000 years. Most modern concrete can fall apart in about 50 to 100 years, especially in harsher conditions, but clearly not ancient Roman concrete. Well, there's a trick. Romans mixed volcanic ash called pozzolana with quicklime and heated it before adding water. This creates bits of lime clasts, which are hard lumps that aren't normally in modern concrete. When cracks formed and water seeped in, those lime clasts dissolved a bit and sealed the crack by growing calcite crystals back in place. So basically it almost glues itself back together. Scientists from MIT tested this. They made the Roman mix, broke it, soaked it in water, and the cracks healed up in weeks. Modern concrete just crumbles apart. In 132 CE, a Chinese inventor named Zhang Heng built something that could detect earthquakes long before anyone could feel them. It was called a seismoscope, and it worked so well that when one of its indicators went off, people thought it had malfunctioned until a messenger showed up days later confirming a quake had hit far away. This was basically a big bronze vessel surrounded by 8 dragon heads, each holding a metal ball. Below each one was a toad with its mouth open. When a distant earthquake hit, one of the balls would drop, pointing to the direction the quake came from. Nobody really knows how it worked. Some scientists think there was a pendulum inside that shook when the ground moved and somehow set off the ball drop, but nobody really knows for sure. The original device is long gone, and there's no blueprint or clear instructions on how it was built. People have tried to rebuild it using different mechanisms. Some get the ball drop system to work, but none of them function quite like the records say the original did. What makes this so amazing is that it was reportedly able to detect quakes hundreds of miles away without modern sensors. For something built nearly 2,000 years ago, that's insane. The Lycurgus cup is this glass goblet from the 4th century that looks green when you shine light in front of it, but stick a light behind it and it turns deep red. Why? Because it's loaded with tiny gold and silver particles, so tiny they're measured in nanometers, roughly 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. The gold makes it glow red when the light passes through, and the silver reflects green when light bounces off it. That's how the colors flip depending on where the light's coming from. Scientists finally figured this out about 60 years ago. They used electron microscopes to spot the microscopic metal blobs in the glass. People have tried to recreate this. There's some experimental 3D printed stuff going on, but we still don't know exactly how the Romans nailed it so perfectly all those years ago. Somehow ancient glassmakers made this thing, maybe without knowing any of the science behind it. There's a theory that they accidentally created this thing, which would be pretty interesting. Everyone knows a Stradivarius violin sounds amazing, but even today no one can fully explain why. Antonio Stradivari built these legendary instruments in Italy during the late 1600s and early 1700s. About 650 are still around, each are worth millions. Scientists have studied the wood, the varnish, and the structure using everything from CT scans to chemical tests. Some think the secret is the density of the wood itself. It grew during a mini ice age. Trees grow slower when it's cold, and that makes the wood rings tighter and more uniform. That kind of wood vibrates differently. It carries sound better. more evenly across the body of the instrument, which of course helps produce that clean, warm tone these violins are known for. The varnish is another mystery. Stradivari used some kind of mix involving tree resin, oil, maybe even borax to stop bugs. Whatever it was though, it soaked into the wood just the right amount without killing the sound. People have tried to recreate it, but no one can get it exactly right. Even tiny differences in how thick the varnish was or how long it cured could change the way the violin sounds. So yeah, modern makers can get close, but something in Stradivari's process, maybe the wood, maybe the varnish, maybe both, is still a mystery. King Tutankhamun's dagger is literally alien. The dagger is made from nickel-rich meteorite iron that was smithed into a razor-sharp blade around 1330 BCE. Scientists confirmed this by analyzing the metal. They found about 11% nickel, way above what's normal, for Earth rock that is. Now, Egypt was still in the Bronze Age. Iron smelting wasn't a thing yet, so they likely hammered a chunk of meteorite into shape. It's possible they heated it a bit to soften it, but definitely nothing like modern forging. Today, we can analyze it, scan it, and tell you where the meteor came from, but we still don't know exactly how they worked with it, how they shaped it so precisely, and how it came out looking as good as it does. Now for one of the weirdest ones on the list, flexible glass, or vitrum flexile. So a story from the reign of Emperor Tiberius in the 1st century says that an inventor brought Tiberius a bowl made of glass. It wouldn't shatter when it dropped, it just dented, and the guy could also hammer it back into shape. Tiberius asked if anyone else knew how to make it. The inventor said no, it was his secret, so Tiberius had him killed. Why? Well, supposedly the emperor didn't want the secret getting out because it might devalue gold and silver. No one's ever found an actual piece, so there's a good chance this is just a myth, but some researchers think it might have been real. Still, we've never found archaeological proof of this. The only evidence is in stories. But if it was real, it would mean that Roman glassmakers invented shock-proof glass centuries before it was a thing. And we may never know exactly how. Alright, this one's wild. Tesla basically wanted to invent a peace weapon that would end all wars. Around 1934, he started talking publicly about something he called the Teleforce device, later nicknamed the Death Ray. The idea was pump super high energy through a beam of particles so powerful it could bring down armies or planes from hundreds of miles away. He claimed he could stop an entire fleet of enemy aircraft at 250 miles, and that countries with it would be virtually untouchable. He tried to get funding from the US, Britain even offered it to the League of Nations. The Soviets apparently kicked in $25,000, but nobody ever saw a functioning model. After Tesla died, a bunch of his papers went missing, so there's a chance there was blueprints of this that have just been lost forever or hidden away somewhere.
Kicking off the list at number 10, car shovel. And no, I don't mean a snow brush, I mean a car with a shovel on the front. Listen to this crap. In the early days, old-timey automobiles were obviously super dangerous. They didn't have a rear view camera, cars couldn't park, nor could they drive themselves. They were also new to civilians. Nobody expected a large machine to pop out of an alley. A lot of people were getting hit by cars in the 1930s. That whole ahuga thing wasn't really effective. Especially the days when only like 5 people had cars, no one was really looking around for these beasts. So the solution, brought to life by inventor A.J. Graham, was to attach a bench to the front of an automobile. So if you hit somebody, they can at least just, sit and hang out while you figure out where the brake pedal is. I mean, is this a solution? I feel like that's more alarming than getting just hit by a car. Imagine turning onto Carnaby Street, then all of a sudden you're just floating in the air. Like, what just happened? Why am I in the invisible boatmobile? Number 9, the family bicycle. This bizarre invention we can gladly keep in the past. Inventor Charles Steinlauf made a family bicycle back in 1939. And no, I'm not talking about a tandem bike with 4 seats. I'm talking about this nightmare. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. So there's one person in the front just making sure, there's no other people or families of bikes that you're gonna hit. The driver is hunched over on the top at a nice 45-degree angle, super cozy, with their butt right in front of the back pedaler. It's a good view. They're sitting right over top of, you guessed it, the sewing seat. I can't edit a Google Doc in an Uber, let alone sew a nightgown on the road. Sorry your top doesn't fit. I made it on a Dr. Seuss bike. Number 8. Anti-theft briefcase. Morning commutes can be quite hectic, and today we thankfully have slim, safe anti-theft backpacks so you don't have to worry about losing any belongings during that early morning rush. In the late 1950s though, they had anti-bandit bags, which had a couple of neat tricks. The first bag came out in 1959. Banks were being robbed constantly while transporting cash, so the smoke bag came out. Red mist would cover the thief or scare them away, ideally, and it worked for the most part. Kind of inspired that blue ink that pops out, like the blue ink that sprays all over the cash you get from banks. That's like a newer version of this red mist smoke trick. And then come 1963, the anti-bandit bag came out. The bag that emptied its contents if it were to get stolen. Perfect. Inventor John H.T. Rinfret was tired of being robbed all the time, so he designed this, where if you turn your thumb the wrong way accidentally, you're hilariously late for work. Yeah, sorry, my briefcase got stolen, and then I had to clean up all of my shit. Horrible morning. Number 7, the Dynasphere. This next one made me laugh while I was typing this up. This is so scary and funny. The Dynasphere, ladies and gentlemen, is my new favorite thing. Again, we're going back to the early 1930s for this one. Inventor John Purves was inspired by one of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, so he made this Decepticon. The Dynasphere could reach speeds of 30 miles an hour, and there were 2 built in history. One that was electric and one that was gas powered. That went much faster. These things were well on their way, I guess. They thought this was the future, but physics, am I right? Hitting the brake too hard would cause the driver to gerbil, which means instead of the outer rim spinning, the inside would only spin. That's so scary. We've only recently figured out this type of monowheel, and I gotta say, even today, it still doesn't look cool. Okay, it looks a little bit cool. It's kinda cool. Number 6, the Meow Machine. If you had a mouse problem back in 1963, this handy Meow Machine would do just the trick, and it would only meow 10 times a minute. How not annoying is that? Good luck sleeping. Its eyes would light up as well every time it meowed. So it looked cursed, but that was the main goal. It was to scare away rodents that would tiptoe through your kitchen at 1 a.m. This was the route you went if you didn't feel like using poison. You know, the thing that works. Because this of course didn't work too well at all. These mice aren't Ratatouille, they're not going to be afraid of like things moving. A robotic meow and little blinky lights, it's not going to work. Number 5, the fat trimmer. We have Apple Watches, Fitbits, apps. We have technology that can monitor your heart and let you know what's happening before you even know. We have watches that can tell if you fall over. It's amazing. But did you know that working out in the 1920s was so easy that you just had to stand completely still? Almost sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It is. The hip trimmer was this vibrating exercise belt which shook your fat away. Sounds pretty crazy, well that's because it was, and it didn't work. Sometimes things that feel too easy just are. Jillian Michaels, for example, she went through numerous lawsuits over her fat-burning pills. The Kardashians also pushed this waist trainer, also ended in a $5 million class action lawsuit. The one that was called Waist Gang, appropriate title, wasting your money, hashtag Waist Gang. The Flex Belt, a newer version of the fat trimmer, had to completely change their advertising after it was deemed false and just blatantly wrong. Some of these inventions only happen once, while things like these are constantly rebooted and fail over and over and over again. Number 4, radioactive water. Back in 1932, even Byers, at just 51 years old, he was a steel manufacturer and a golf pro, but he met his fate in a horrible, horrible way. He was told to drink this product by his physiotherapist. He said that drinking this radioactive water was going to help him with his golfer's arm and his fatigue. Each of these bottles contained 1 microgram of radium and 1 microgram of isothorium mixed with water. If this sounds like a bad idea, well, you're very much onto something. It was horrible. The guy would drink radiation after every meal. Like sure, he lost weight and he felt good for a bit, but eventually he developed bone necrosis in his jaw and he lost several teeth before his jaw straight up just fell off. We know a little bit more about radiation these days, thankfully, but that poor guy, I can't even imagine. When they said results were jaw-dropping, they didn't mean literally. Number 3, the butter protector. Finally, something to protect our butter. Our prayers have been answered. Back in the 50s, nothing was more embarrassing than dragging your sleeve through a stick of butter. So inventor Russell E. Oakes thought of a solution that was going to change the entire world, but also at the same time, make him rich. A butter protector. Instead of moving the butter away from the one path your elbow will take while eating a meal, put this larger thing there. Now instead of your elbow hitting the butter, you'll have to dodge this frisbee-sized contraption. We have things kind of like this today, but those are made of mesh. They keep bugs away from your picnic. This thing didn't even get to the mesh part. Then some genius came along and made a butter container that wasn't the size of a dinner plate, so this guy of course went out of business. The butter protector. Okay, relax. Number 2, the donut dunker. Another classic. I'm gonna put this one on my wish list. The donut dunker is exactly what you think. Invented again by Russell E. Oakes, our main guy. This device was used so you can enjoy your breakfast without making a mess. Yeah, instead of wiping your fingers and mouth with a napkin like a normal person, you would have to WD-40 this thing off and then put it on your table, make sure both the dunker and the donuts and the coffee were all perfectly lined up, and then, and only then, were you set for breakfast. In the 1930s, the National Dunking Association, and no, I don't mean the cool dunk, thought that they made a breakthrough invention. Check this out, Russell. We're good. And finally, number 1, Vita Radium Suppositories. With guaranteed real radium, the home products company of Denver, Colorado came out with these handy suppositories back in 1930, and the way they marketed these things just made you feel like shit, because apparently that's how you do it. The company reaches out to weak and discouraged men. Me? If you are showing signs of slowing up in your actions and duties, perhaps if you have begun to lose your charm, your personality, your normal manly vigor, then certainly you want to stage a comeback. The man who's lost all these things knows how to appreciate their value. He realizes that happiness depends on his ability to perform the duties of a real man. Sweet, glorious pleasures of life. Nature intended that you should enjoy them. Now is the time to act. And then they put radiation right up their butt. Number 10, Birkin Bronze Radium Chocolate. Yum, hope we're eating right off the bat for this one. These delights were sold between 1931 to 1936, and these chocolates were praised for the effect that it had on its consumers. See, instead of getting a tummy ache after downing some Birkin Bronze chocolate, you would feel rejuvenated, you would feel fresh. See, this chocolate was made in real radium water, so yeah, you're gonna feel something. Guaranteed. Looking back now at the details I just provided you, yeah, you can only imagine the horror stories that slowly began to spread over these new tasty treats. My New Year's resolution personally is no more chocolate, and this point right here is helping me out, so cool, no thanks. Next, number 9, the ducking stools. Oh, this one we thought we had something, really. There's the crane, then there's the ducking stool. Both, it was close. This was a punishment used in the 16th and 17th century England, and it was usually a punishment that was reserved for women because they were witches, right? Remember? Yeah. So dumb. This punishment was given to a woman for doing what was considered unwomanly things, whatever that was supposed to mean back then, you can only imagine. Apparently, this included things like having an argument with their husband, or fighting with the neighbors, or gossiping and or backstabbing. Ugh, God forbid. Classic Middle Ages. Hey, Margaret was gossiping around town, so let's all take the day off work and then go dunk her in the river with this new stool I created. Awesome. Basically, this punishment would see a woman being tied up to a stool or a chair, and then dipped into a lake or stream over and over. It was actually, like, scientifically, it was miraculous, but it was a horrible purpose. This was actually a punishment method that didn't usually end up in death, but I mean, it was pretty bad still, right? Number 8, spray on hair. All right, shout out to all my bald kings out there. There we go. If you're watching this, hit that thumbs up. The babes are back. Yeah, that's what this real advertisement says about spray on hair. The babes are back. There we go. We can see them coming in just like that. They went somewhere and then babes returned because of the hair. Gotcha. Look, I'm 28 years old. I know a lot of guys have bad luck hair-wise at this age, and I'm not talking smack, okay? But spray on hair, it's not the solution, okay? Just buzz it, just bick it, just commit, all right? This early 1990s product did not work. It didn't sweep the nation. Men did not regain their youth for $39 plus shipping. No, it didn't happen. It just looked like spray painted cobwebs on your head. It looked like Halloween spooky cobwebs on top of your stupid head. The advertisement legitimately says the babes are back, which implies that said babes noticed his bald spot, decided as a group, had a meeting, you know, made it official that they had to leave, right? And then women decided that they loved bald guys. Then they came back because they saw the spray. No. I don't buy that. Women love bald guys, okay? Vin Diesel, The Rock, Patrick Stewart, are you kidding me? Professor X? Number 7, daylight motion pictures. I saw Avatar 2 last night, and I swear, hand to God, the lights stayed on for the first 5 minutes of the film. It was insane. It was chaos. People were yelling. Ushers were throwing their visors at the lights, trying to shut them off. It was chaos on Pandora, to say the least. You need complete darkness for a film, okay? Me personally, that's my preference. I can't watch anything in the light. But also for the projector's sake, right? We need to see the movie. We have to be able to actually see it. We have 46 lights around me, and you can see me. But back in the 1910s, daylight motion pictures were a thing for a hot minute, and It's as bad as it sounds. This trend moved across the country after a bill was passed, so theaters went from, dark and enjoyable to bright enough so that you can see who's next to you. That was the whole point. See, it was a safety hazard for theaters to not have lights on because, people around, not sure what's going on. If they bring that back today, I'm gonna be upset. I mean, the general public's starting to get all crazy again, so we'll see. Number 6, ab belts. All right, shout out to all my jacked kings out there with your 9-packs. Here we go. The perfect product for guys who want an 8-pack without doing any other work. Here we go. Welcome to the ab belt. The ab belt sounds too good to be true, and well, that's because it was. Ab belts in the 90s were as hot as Tom Hanks was in the 90s. It was insane. Everybody loved this, right? I think we may have had one growing up. Now that I think about it, I was like, what is this thing? Or it could have been something I don't even want to know. Never mind. Science can't confirm that wearing an ab belt has zero benefit. No, it just shakes you just gotta go to the washroom after. That's it. If your company is thinking about making false claims, you should expect real lawsuits to follow. Yeah, that's why they all disappeared. Can't just say that and then nothing happens. No. Number 5, the walking sleeping bag. There we go. My brother sleepwalks. He's been sleepwalking his whole life. Where was this growing up? This would have caused a lot of more problems, actually, now that I think about it. A sleeping bag, but with footholes and a head hole. But take this in, no holes for the arms. How fun is that? Yeah, just risking your life, I guess. Just legs and face. I can't think of a more dangerous product, actually. As somebody who's broken his front teeth twice before, I can say with confidence this is the worst product in history. One misstep and you're just watching your doom coming closer to your face. That's it. I mean, I get it. On paper, I get that's a cozy few minutes. Maybe it's funny, make your friends laugh. But what about when you can't find the zipper? Then what? Now you're trying to David Copperfield your way out of an escape bag of death while you're dozy too, while you're like half asleep. No way, no thanks. Number 4, radiated toys. Great for the family. Here we go. There's Monopoly, then there's this one right here. There's the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab set. The Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab toy set sure looks fun upon first glance, I guess, but when the company released this toy kit back in 1950, it was all but games. Gilbert, who was a successful toy maker at the time, he was a businessman, even a magician. It's always cool. It's a triple threat right there. Always cool when you're a magician on the side. He believed that his line of work should be fun yet informative. Yeah, one of those nerds. He was nicknamed the man who saved Christmas, actually, after he convinced the US Council of National Defense to not ban toy purchases during World War I around the holiday season. So he's done some things. Real business guy. He really wanted to get this one out there. He was eager. This set was around $50, which back in the day was quite a lot. And the price was justified as the set was actually radioactive. Sorry, what? That's right, the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab set contained a cloud chamber where you can actually see real alpha particles traveling at a mere 12,000 miles a second. Yeah, imagine asking for a light bright, you open that, you're like, do we have the receipt? Might take this one back. Yeah, it's glowing and now I feel sick, so let's take it back. Number 3, the collar. This one looks really bad at first, but then the true punishment actually comes after the crime. Here we go. The collar. This is this heavy metal ring with spikes. Now, the collar is meant to sit on your neck and it's to prevent you from moving. Like at all. See, these spikes were adjustable, so more often than not, they would be tightened just until they're close to the neck, so that if and only when the victim moved, then it would pierce your skin. You've probably seen this in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's tucked into the collar, but now it's more than one. I don't know. You couldn't lay down, you couldn't sleep, obviously, and although you could eat, swallowing was tough. Any slight movement, and you're gonna feel a little poke. It's not nice. Whenever I see this, I always think of the Will Smith 1999 classic, Wild Wild West. Some scary neck situations going on in that film, that's for sure. Cinematic masterpiece, that one. So good. Will Smith, man, it got slaps in the cinema, you know? Number 2, Spanish tickler. Yeah, its name sounds a little fun, dare I say a little, you know? The Spanish tickler is all but, yeah, it's also referred to as the cat's paw, which is a bit closer to its real purpose here. This Freddy Krueger looking thing was dragged down the victim's skin back in medieval times. Now, it was designed at that angle so that your flesh would be torn off of your bones and muscle easily. Yeah, the Middle Ages gave us an hourglass and they also gave us this. So, you know, take your pick. To make things even worse, the Spanish tickler would often be attached to a pole. So users could stand far away and just, you know, have at it. What a cheap way to harm somebody or punish someone back then, right? At least get close, you wimp. I included some horrible devices like this on our list because back then in the Middle Ages, they thought they were fancy with these devices, right? Some dude's like, yes, my next gadget. He has like an hourglass and stuff. And then he's like, this one will change everything. And it's the Spanish tickler. You're like, Guy, we need hydro. We don't need this. Get this out of here. And finally, number 1, the pear of anguish, also known as the mouth pear or the choke pear. Awesome. Don't those both sound so intriguing and fun? The mouth pear, the choke pear, it's so gross. Hey, I left my choke pear at your house. Chris, you mind bringing that to work tomorrow? I left my choke pear. Thanks, man. I need that for a staff party. This is one of the worst inventions ever, so I had to finish on it, right? I wish I didn't know about this, but I do, and now you have to as well. Hit that thumbs up for forced knowledge. When you click a video on the worst things from the Middle Ages or Rome, whatever, without getting too graphic here, on the one side, the pear side, that would go into your mouth. Or other places if you're creative, but we'll say the mouth for this one, right? Sure. And then on the other side, there's a screw, where if you turn said screw, that pear side begins to open up. It blooms like a flower almost. I say flower, this thing is not beautiful at all, it's haunting. It's one of those inventions where it avoids the loss of blood. So again, somebody thought they were onto something back in the day. They thought they were creative with this one. So this was a creative, horrible way to get somebody to talk without having them die. Which is insane, but it's also, I admit, it's kind of creative. Also, it's kind of hard to talk when there's a choke pear in your mouth, so someone's got to figure that out. These were also used to just prevent somebody from talking entirely, right? It was, again, creative.